to do better things. So there's kind of a negative approach, like don't do that. I'm going to try not to do this. Or like, for instance, instead of getting angry, you could try to be more happy rather than working at trying to be less angry. So that is what we're going to talk about today. So this is titled The Four Poisons and the Four Antidotes. So I have symmetry, 4 and 4. And it's actually supposed to be 3 poisons, but I couldn't take it. So I changed it to 4. So I wanted to go over with you, there's 3 famous poisons in Buddhism, 3 things that get in our way. And I told you Teague, my son, went to PA school. And commonly the translation is used is the word poisons. But Teague said that really irritates him, not just as a physician's assistant, but as a Buddhist. So he kind of gave me a lecture. He said, poisons are things you ingest. So cyanide, arsenic, things that you take. And so the 3 poisons in Buddhism aren't really things that come from the outside. It's not something wrong with the world. It's something internal. It's the way we see things. It's the way we cognize and perceive it. It's the narratives we generate in our minds. So Teague said, medically speaking and Buddhist speaking, poisons is not such a great word. And I said, well, how about venom? And he said that even drives him more crazy because he says they always say it was a poisonous snake. They're not poisonous snakes. They're venomous snakes. So if you get bit by something that injects, poison into you, it's venom. So rattlesnakes are venomous. Tarantulas are venomous. They're not poisonous. So I said, okay, if I can't use poison and I can't use venom, what am I supposed to do? My talk is in grave jeopardy now. And I like to be accurate, medically and Buddhistically. So he said toxins is a good word, that we generate toxins. So traditionally it's the 3 poisons, but toxins is probably a better word. It's coming from the inside out. And I think I've mentioned this to you before, but one of the things that's confusing about Buddhism is it developed in ancient India to an Indian audience. And we're all culturally modern Americans. So one of the differences is they have different animal similes than we do. So I'm gonna tell you the animals that relate to each of the 3 toxins, but it doesn't make a lot of sense because they have different animal similes. And I'll explain what that is. The other thing different cultures have is they have different sounds of animals. You know, like we say bow wow for a dog. They don't say that in Spanish. And like we say cock-a-doodle-doo for rooster. I think they say something like chi-chi-chiri or something. I took Spanish in high school. That's probably I just remember the animal sounds in Spanish. So if I went to Mexico, I could speak to roosters like that. I'd be really good. So here's some in English. Blind as a bat. Wise as an owl. Oops. Wise as a... Okay, good. And there's a mistake on here. It says hungry as a horse, but that looks like a wolf. So I think that's a typo. How about quiet as a... Okay, good. So the first toxin is greed. And there are 3 animals they use for these 3 toxins. They use a bird, a snake, and a pig. And they're in the middle of this wheel. And it's what drives our suffering. It's the engine or the axle that drives our transmigration. And so for greed, I assumed it was the pig because I thought pigs eat a lot. They're very greedy. It's actually the bird. And in all the books, they say it's a rooster. I don't think they had chickens in India 2,500 years ago, but I'm not sure. I need to go to an archaeologist, biologist for that. But it has to be a bird with talons. It has to be a grasping bird. So it has to be a hawk, an owl, an eagle. It can't be a sparrow. It has to be some kind of an animal that is always grasping. So that's the animal they use. So greedy as a I know it. It's Indian, so we don't know. We don't know. The next one is anger. So what we have left is a pig and a snake. Which do you think would represent anger? Snake. Very good. Rattlesnakes are venomous, and if you bug them, they're very angry. So this one surprised me. The only animal we have left is what? Pig. So pigs are actually highly intelligent. I think they might even be smarter than dogs. They're very bright. They don't seem ignorant to me. But in Indian culture, they're ignorant because I guess they just ate whatever is out there. Like whatever their nose comes across, they'll eat it. So it might be a truffle or it might be a rock. And I mean, it's going down. So it's ignorance in that sense. Very, not dumb, but very spontaneous without thinking about consequences. That kind of ignorance of consequences of your actions. So this is the fourth one I added, just so I could have 4 and 4. So this is how I get away with adding the fourth. The 3 poisons or toxins, greed, anger, and ignorance, lead to our suffering. So I have this wonderful mathematical equation, greed plus anger plus ignorance equals suffering. Okay, so that's my proof. That is a mathematical proof. I contend that it's true. So what you can do in life is you can really try to not be greedy, not be angry, and really try to think about consequences in your life. So that's the first approach. The first approach is to remove the negatives from your life. The second approach is to try to add something positive to your life. So like for 38 years of my life, I tried to remove the negative, but when I came to the temple, it seemed like we were focusing on the positive, like the golden, is that the song we sang? What's it called? Golden Chain. Golden Chain, metta, the metta, loving kindness. So for example, if you have an infection, you can either try to remove the infected area or you could take antibiotics. So rather than trying to remove the problem, you take an antidote. You would take an antidote to try to heal it from the inside out. So I wanted to share this with you, the 2 approaches. I've been a full-time minister since September 1st, 2017. So I'm doing my second lap now. And in the office, upstairs on the 3rd floor, against the wall by the bullpen, this is by one of the computers. And it's been there for like, ever since I started, and it's driving me mad. It's this wonderful golden quarter, and it's sitting on this little piece of paper, and it says, "Do not touch." And it's driving me crazy. I want to touch it so bad. And it's almost like somebody's just messing with me. Why would you put this beautiful, amazing golden quarter on the table in public and then write "do not touch"? Like, take it home, put it in a glass case. So I touch it a lot. I do. When Nancy Hara's not looking, I touch it. It's a real quarter, but I can't figure out how it got to be gold. So this is where the strategy of not doing things kind of fails. Like when I was a little boy at Mexican restaurants, the lady would bring the plate to the table, the waitress, and say, "Hot plate." And my mom would go, "Don't do that, it's a hot plate." And I would say, I was like 8, I'd say, "It's not that hot. It's really not that hot." I felt hotter. So this is another approach. Touch. Pick up an nenju. So this is a positive approach. I don't know how to edit graphics, so I had to just cover the "do not" with my nenju. So I wanted to share with you 4 antidotes, and this is actually called the 4 antidotes in Buddhism. So for greed, we have sympathetic joy, where you feel the joy of others. So if you feel the joy of others, you don't get greedy, right? You don't want what someone else has because you take pleasure in their achievements. This is hard, but if somebody you know gets a raise, you could be happy for them. They really needed it. It's a really good news. So for anger would be loving kindness, which we just read. And that is called metta practice. So the word metta actually means loving kindness. I think I should have a hyphen there. But loving kindness is a translation for metta. And Ron Artest, they used to be on the Lakers. Yeah? A lot of people tell me when I talk about sports, they tune out. So Ron Artest was a really great basketball player. He played for the Indiana Pacers, and he actually got so angry that he went up into the stands and he got in a fight with the fans. And from the NBA management point of view, that's a bad thing, really bad to have your players fighting and hitting your fans. So he had like a 4 or 6 month suspension. And after that was over, he was rehabilitated and he was on the Lakers. And he had a wonderful 7th game against the Celtics. I think he was the best player. He was better than Kobe that night. And he changed his name to, he's not Ron Artest anymore. He's Metta World Peace. So a little off the wall. I probably wouldn't go that way. But that's where Metta World Peace comes from, is this practice. Maybe he realized how angry he was, and he really needed to do this. This was his practice. Maybe number 2 is the one that he really had the most trouble with. Next is to have compassion, to be wise in action. I was hitting the shift button. And suffering is to have equanimity, to be peaceful and balanced in your life. So I kind of wanted to go over these real quick with you. So here we go. I have this great symmetric chart. I have 4 things on the left, and I have 4 things on the right. So for sympathetic joy is taking sympathetic or altruistic joy in the happiness of others. People also identify sympathetic joy with empathy. The cultivation of sympathetic joy is an antidote to envy and jealousy. This is the antidote for greed. Loving kindness. So, I tend to exaggerate. I'm very enthusiastic. And I told you that story at work. I told my boss I exaggerate 10,000 times a day. And he said, well, I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration. I said, okay, 10,001. So it says here that you cannot overstate. This cannot be overstated. So the importance of loving kindness in Buddhism cannot be overstated. Loving kindness is benevolence toward all beings without discrimination or selfish attachment. This is an antidote for anger. Compassion. Compassion is active sympathy extended to all sentient beings. Ideally, compassion is wisdom in action, which leads to the realization that all sentient beings exist in relationship to one another and derive their identity from each other. This is an antidote for ignorance. Equanimity. Equanimity is a mind in balance, free of discrimination and rooted in insight. This balance is not indifference. So this happens a lot. If you're unattached, it doesn't mean you're detached. So we're very extreme in the West. If you're not attached to something, that doesn't mean you're detached. It means you have a healthy relationship with something. So the balance is not indifference, but active mindfulness, because it is rooted in insight of no self. It is not unbalanced by the passions of attraction and aversion. This is an antidote for suffering. So these things are all really nice to say. Almost all world religions say you should be nice, right? They all say you shouldn't steal and you should be nice. That's not that provocative or earth-shattering of a statement. But I think what's substantial about Buddhism is it provides practice. That's where these things begin to become real for us. Just having a goal is good. It sets our orientation. But we really need a method or a practice that begins to develop these qualities within us naturally. So for practice, it's important to understand that these mental states are not mere emotions, nor is it possible to simply make up your mind you are going to be loving, compassionate, empathetic, and balanced from now on. Truly dwelling in these 4 states requires changing how you experience and perceive yourself and others. So for us, I think these 4 antidotes are kind of all wrapped around saying Namo Amida Butsu. Feeling connected, feeling a part of something, acknowledging something beyond ourselves, opening up our hearts. And so we have debates at book club about how do you know when Buddhism's true. And I think it's important to understand it logically and rationally and be able to accept it that way first. I had to do that. I was the doubting Thomas of Buddhism, which is mixing my religious metaphors, but I was kind of hesitant to go all in. I didn't really have faith in the program. I had doubt. So I studied a lot. But even after I kind of understood it and could explain it, it wasn't really affecting my heart or the way I lived. And so most Sundays I came, but some Sundays I wanted to run on the beach, or there's Breakfast with the Beatles. I love, there's the Beatles. Well, there was the Beatles and then Buddhism, and then over time. I actually like Buddhism better than the Beatles now. But I wanted to stay home and listen to the Beatles. And what I noticed is the weeks I didn't go on Sunday, I actually didn't do as well at work or at life. I had more frustration at work. I was a little bit more angry. And one time when I missed church, I was running, listening to Breakfast with the Beatles, and I crossed Brookhurst at Indianapolis. I felt a little guilty for not going to church, and guess who was at the spotlight? It was Alan and Renee Moriyama saw me. They were on the way to church. I just went, what are the odds of that happening? But I found when I came to church, I had a better week. By listening to the Dharma, by chanting, by saying Namo Amida Butsu, and by practicing with the Sangha and being with you and practicing together, I had a better week. I wasn't as anxious. I wasn't as angry. I had more equanimity and balance. Things didn't upset me as much. So for myself, I think in America, we tend to think about not doing bad rather than focusing on developing good. And even in our culture, I'm going to talk about Christianity for a sec, but it's a cultural thing. We always have that funny story that when you die, you go to the pearly gates, and St. Peter's there with a list of all the things you've done wrong, right? We kind of think, how many things have I done bad? Reverend Miyagi once said that in Buddhism, when you die, they have a list of all the things you've done good. And he said, if one time you didn't step on a bug, you're in. Just because if you did something just one time in your life, if you did something selfless, you have the heart of the Buddha and you're in. So it's a totally different way of thinking about things. And so maybe we need a balance of both, but I just feel like we tend as a culture to overemphasize not doing the negative rather than developing the positive, which I think is what Buddhist practice does when we meet every Sunday. So thank you very much. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Butsu, Naman Dabuts, Naman Dabuts, Naman Dabuts. Thank you very much.